Welcome to your daily devotional with me, PMV. Last time in Revelation 1:10, we saw that John heard a voice like a trumpet behind him, and then as he turns, we'll see it's Jesus, and Jesus has a message specifically to John. In verse 11 of Revelation 1, it records Jesus speaking, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. What you see, write in a book and send it to the 7 churches which are in Asia, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamos, to Thyatira, to Sardis, to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea." So we will deal with these specific churches and Jesus' message to them in the coming weeks. But for today, I want to look at what does it mean for Jesus to be the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. What does this mean to our lives today? Because we'll see this becomes a point of emphasis. It's repeated in Revelation 1. And this isn't God just being redundant. He's making a point he wants to get across to us that will help us as we look through this prophecy, this apocalyptic literature known to us as the book of Revelation. In Revelation chapter 1:11, these 3 descriptors are used of Jesus, the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. And I would never claim to understand everything that Jesus is getting at when he refers to himself this way. But I think there are at least 3 things that we can apply to our lives from these names, these designations that Jesus uses. Okay, first, he is the Alpha. He's the beginning. He's the first. Alpha was the first, is the first letter in the Greek alphabet. So what Jesus is saying is that he's first in everything, both in importance and like a firstborn son in ancient times, everything belongs to him. He receives the inheritance. So the inheritance of God's creation goes to who? To Jesus. So the first thing that we can learn about Jesus being the first and the last is that Jesus is first place in God's plan, and he is first place. That is his rightful place in our lives. Did you know that you can go through the 39 books of the Old Testament and find Jesus in each of those? The Old Testament is full of prophecies, allusions, and foreshadowings that all point to Jesus. So step back for a moment and just think about that. If God had his word written in such a way that over thousands of years with dozens of human authors, and it all has one central figure, which is Jesus, wouldn't you think that that's telling us something? And what about the New Testament? The people who saw Jesus, who were eyewitnesses, the ones that heard his teaching, the ones that understood this is the one that all of the scriptures of old had been pointing to, if they were willing to then suffer horrific persecution and even death for their faith in Jesus, believing that he is the one that all of this was pointing to, doesn't that mean something to our lives today? They were willing to give up everything to keep Jesus first. So the application for us becomes obvious. What price are you willing to pay for Jesus to be first in your life? That's the first thing this morning that I want to ask you. Most believers in the West in the 21st century are weak-willed when it comes to the concept of suffering. We don't want to say it out loud this way, but we believe Jesus needs to keep us first, keep us comfortable, keep us blessed. My friends, this is a weak and unbiblical Christianity. Again, what price are you? What price are we willing to pay to keep Jesus first in our own lives? Are we willing to forgive those who have wronged us because that's what Jesus tells us? Are we willing to love those who have harmed us? Or are we willing to give sacrificially instead of hoarding our wealth because this is what Jesus wants? Are we willing to do the obedience that it takes to keep Jesus first in our own lives? Okay, second, Jesus is the Omega. That's the end, the last. Omega is the last letter in the Greek alphabet. So what does it mean for Jesus to be the end or last? Well, it means he will never be replaced. There is no one else to come. He's everything, and he is the one that everything is moving towards. In fact, as we've seen, Revelation 22, the last chapter of the Bible, has Jesus as the central figure. He is the end it's all moving towards. And in Revelation 22, verse 20, we have the last promise of the Bible. It reads, it's the words of Jesus promising, "Surely I am coming quickly." Now, do you see, Jesus is to be first in everything, but also he is the end of all things. He is the end all things are moving towards, and that includes your life, our lives as well. So that brings us to a second point of application. Jesus is the goal of God's plan. And he is the only truly worthy goal of your life. Howard Hendricks used to say, heaven is not a person. Heaven is not a place, It's a person, Jesus. In other words, what would heaven be apart from Jesus? It wouldn't be heaven at all. Heaven is not a place. It's a person, being in Jesus' presence forever. You may have many good goals in your lives. Maybe you want to be a good mom and raise kids to love Jesus. Maybe you want to be a loving husband and provide for your family. Maybe you want to be a godly grandparent and raise up the next generation. Maybe you're trying to get into a certain school and reach a future goal in your career. Maybe you're trying to make a certain team and advance in that way. Maybe you want to help specific nonprofit organizations, or maybe you just want to save for an early retirement. There are many goals that we can have that are good, that are worth our time, and there are resources. But if you remove what Jesus wants from any of these, then I would say you've already lost. The most important question for all of us to ask is, what does Jesus want? Don't make a move until you know that it is towards the most worthy goal that God has for you in Jesus Christ. If he is truly your goal, then you will learn to allow him to direct your steps along your way to this final destination. That brings us to our final point today. Let's look at Revelation 1:11 one last time, and we'll apply this to our lives. Jesus says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. And what you see, write in a book and send it to the 7 churches which are in Asia, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamos, to Thyatira, to Sardis, to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea." All right, the message that John wrote was a message from God to 7 specific churches. In the days ahead, we will see that those churches had some issues that they needed to deal with if they were going to remain faithful to the Lord till the end. But they were to deal with those issues now in light of the soon coming King Jesus Christ, who is the first and the last. That brings us to our final point of application. Knowing Jesus as the first and the last means that we will be tenacious idol smashers of anything in our lives that attempts to take his rightful place. Notice I said our lives. What I mean by that is that we need to deal with the issues in our own hearts first and let God deal with others in his time, in his way. When it comes to your own heart, be a tenacious idol smasher. An idol is anything that you put before God, and the 7 churches definitely had some issues there. It's anything that takes God's rightful place in your life. But what does that look like? What does it look like to be a tenacious idol smasher? To be tenacious about anything means that you're holding fast to it. You're sticking with it until the end. Do you make excuses for perpetual sin in your life? Or do you aggressively root it out through prayer, confession, humility, and whatever steps it takes to change your life? Be a tenacious idol smasher, because there is only one who is the first and the last, who is worthy of your worship, and his name is Jesus. The thing we don't always see about idols is that they hurt us, but they also hurt everyone around us. We think sin is just a personal matter, that it just stays with us. But it actually affects the way we treat others around us, whether we want to admit it or not. You can't rebel against God in a vacuum. It changes you and affects those around you. So for your love of Jesus, for your desire to live a life that pleases Him and knows His richest blessings, to be ready for His return, to love those around you, be a tenacious idol smasher. Jesus alone is to be first and last. Over the next few days, we'll move through Revelation 1 verses 12 through 20. I hope you'll continue to join me. Thank you for being with me today. For more information, you can go to pmvministries.org. And as always, I hope you have a great day.